the biggest thing about Occupy was, to me, was that as someone who kind of came from an anti-authoritarian, like directly democratic sort of political tendency, and a lot of like mentors of mine, folks like David Graeber, you know, the anthropologist who wrote that giant book Debt, who sadly did pass away recently, but he was so pivotal in that. And these folks were like facilitating and leading this, basically, these assemblies. And there wasn't a cadre that was like, next we're going to march here and we're going to make these demands. It was just sort of like organic, and it was being facilitated. And that's what was unique about it too, was that it wasn't like the answer coalition giving everyone the same sign or telling everyone what the next demand was. What did you notice about that, Sonny? And like, what were like the constraints with that kind of General Assembly, other than a very long discussion about the drum circle?
Yeah, I love the drum circle metaphor as a sort of litmus test about the effectiveness of direct democracy. But I do feel like it, you know, like how good are the drummers, right? Like how much have they been practicing? Like what is their sort of like creative approach? What, you know, like I think all those same questions very much impacted the effectiveness of Occupy structures. First, the General Assembly structure, which is, you know, the sort of like massive meeting run through something called the People's Mic, where we would say something, because no amplification was allowed without a permit, of course. So, you know, you have to speak in these little sentence chunks. And after like 3-4 days, everyone just like talked like that all the time. You always talked in like 4-word fragments. It just became a habit. And then eventually it morphed into the Spokes Council, which was a total shit show. Like that it was a great idea to transform into maybe a more effective decision-making process. But you know, I am not one that feels like the direct democracy, this like guise of leaderlessness or this aspiration of leaderlessness or more horizontal structure was at all a failing of Occupy. It's definitely something that drew me and many others in. I think it's something that was so special about it. And I don't think Occupy had to be like, it wasn't a campaign. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a campaign with like 4 goals that were going to be accomplished through this particular strategy. It was a space, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a space in which lots of different campaigns were possible, right? And lots of different organizations, labor, grassroots, new organizations that were sort of, that didn't even have names at the time, that were percolating right there in Zuccotti Park, could build their own campaigns. And there was space for all of that, right, under this banner of we are the 99%. So I didn't think that was the primary deficit. Same with not having demands. I didn't think that was a deficit at all either. In fact, I thought it was a great thing, right? Because as soon as you have demands, you're limited in a way, right? You kind of become a campaign, even though that's not really what you are, right? I don't know that Occupy was a movement, but it was a space that brought lots of social and economic justice movements and organizations and campaigns together in such a special way. I don't think we've seen anything like that in our lives in the United States quite in that way. And of course, part of the context too is popping off, being inspired by what happened in the Arab Spring, right? Like Occupy was directly, in a sense, the New York's response or the United States response to what was happening in Egypt and Tunisia and beyond, these incredible people's movements, these revolutions. And I think we got like a little taste of what was possible at Occupy, and then, you know, a lot of really hard shit too.
Yeah,
I agree with what Sonny's saying, and I think like when people are like, what did it accomplish? I mean, what it accomplished is that, like, you saw, it was one of those moments, and we saw this again with the Battle of Seattle in '99 as well. Like from 1 week to the next, public opinion in America flipped. So like, it went from like inequality being nowhere in the national conversation to being the top issue. You can see that, you know, when they talk about like millennials and like rising percentages of Americans being sour on capitalism, that's Occupy. Like it completely changed the political conversation in terms of how directly you can critique capitalism. And so that's sort of like how movements go, is it's not like there's not always, sometimes that the way that, I mean, this is one of the things that as a lifelong trade unionist that I really wrestled with is like that there are people who are like me, very steeped in like structure-based organizing that's very methodical. And then sometimes there's an eruption and you just have to, what theorists would call the moment of the whirlwind. And you just have to chase it. One thing about Oak, I was in the Bay for a lot of it, and there was that whole thing where there was Occupy Oakland, and there was the police skirmish, violence where they shot a tear gas canister and cracked the skull of that Iraq veteran, and
Yes.
and then 2 weeks later we had the general strike, and the Oakland general strike was one of the greatest days of my life. Like it was like seeing the police flee the city. It was like just people were standing there screaming at the cops. It was like Oakland was a liberated zone.
Yeah. And I think they learned their lesson because 10 years later,
and we've solved the
they'll
problem of policing in Oakland. So mission
exactly.
accomplished, everyone.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.